Just gonna say, if anyone ever makes me wear a body camera, I'ma tell them straight up, ain't no one wanting to watch me sitting in front of my laptop watching American Gods. Just ain't happening. The Circle is kind of a techno drama directed by James Adam Ponsoldt, who directed The Spectacular Now, is based on the novel of the same name and follows May Holland, played by Emma Watson, who scores an interview of a lifetime with The Circle, an elusive tech company that parallels sort of Google, Apple or Facebook, and eventually scores a job, and we sort of watch her rise through the ranks of the company, becoming sort of a Steve Jobs type figure. And what we get is a film that doesn't really know what it wants to be. Is it a smart Danny Boyle tech drama, or more of a techno thriller like Snowden? It's not really either, to be honest. Unfortunately, where the film falls is its plot, because it just doesn't really have one. The film is ultimately a lot of small scenes that try to kind of make up a film. We very abruptly get to see Emma score this new gig with no real setup. We see her kind of in this monotonous job for one very small quick scene, and then she's whisked away to the Circle. So we don't really get any build up that she's in this really horrible job that she dislikes. I mean, really, the job doesn't really seem that bad, to be honest, because we just don't really get to see much of it. But she's very quickly thrown into this new job. Her parents, played by the late great Bill Paxton, rest in peace. I mean, when I saw Bill Paxton on the screen, I genuinely teared up. It was really kind of hard seeing him after his passing, and the fact that this is his last film appearance is probably even sadder. But yeah, unfortunately, sad to see. As much as I enjoy watching Bill Paxton, just sad to see him on the screen after his passing. Bill Paxton plays her father, while Glenn Headey plays her mother, and a lot of their subplot deals with Bill's character being sick. He's a character who deals with MS, and the parents kind of act as the moral voice of the film for Emma's character. Now, the film asks a lot of questions about privacy, and it succeeds in making it feel very invasive. At the start of the film, Emma is shot to be much smaller than a lot of the other employees at the Circle. She looks smaller, she's out of her element, she's been thrust into this new world that she doesn't really understand, and we really feel that for her. We feel that she's out of place, that she doesn't feel like she quite belongs yet, and the film does a really good job of making all the employees feel very invasive. They're approaching Emma with these questions about her updating her website, her social media feeds, why she's not accepting these requests from people, or why she's not posting on social media, and they're very in her face about it, and we get that, and that's really well done. There's really interesting concepts where cameras are sort of placed on bodies, and there's tech that is placed inside of bodies, and a lot of this is done without kind of asking permission. One of the concepts from the very beginning of the film is Tom Hanks's character, who is kind of like almost a Steve Jobs type figure as well. He's kind of there to give these presentations to the company. Tom Hanks's character shows off these cameras that are placed throughout the world, and he's done this sort of without permission. And from there you start to ask the questions of, oh well, should he really be allowed to do this? Is this right? Does this feel wrong? But unfortunately, it all comes down to how these ideas and concepts are executed in a fully functioning film. The movie kind of comes across as kind of like an episode of Black Mirror almost. It feels like an extended episode of Black Mirror. Imagine an episode of Black Mirror where it feels like an Apple presentation. And for 110 minutes that the film runs for, it almost is an Apple presentation. We don't really get the progression of Emma's character being well established. It really jumps from her being this nobody in the company to a celebrity amongst everyone really quickly, and that setup of her becoming a celebrity and why she becomes invited to be vital to the company is very quick and feels really unrealistic, as if you're watching it and you go, there's no way she'd be plucked from a scenario like this and suddenly thrust upon the world, and suddenly she's the face of this company. But you definitely get the feel that this is Emma Watson's movie. She's the face of it. Even though there are supporting cast in the film, this is definitely her film. The film is always focused on Emma Watson. We have, as mentioned before, Tom Hanks is in the film, John Boyega, Ella Coltrane from Boyhood, Karen Gillian, and Patton Oswalt, and they just unfortunately don't get a whole lot to do. Tom Hanks and Patton Oswalt pretty much play the same character. They're the heads of the company, and while they're both great, they're just unnecessary. I mean, they're the kind of antagonists, but the film doesn't really have a clear-cut antagonist. It's never really made perfectly clear, but they wind up kind of being the antagonists. And they're very thinly spread throughout the film. We don't really see a whole lot of them in the movie, which is really odd because Tom Hanks' face is on the poster. Ta-da! And as mentioned, John Boyega is in the film, but he's barely in it. We get a scene with him close to the very beginning of the film, where we get to sort of establish a little bit of relationship between John Boyega and Emma Watson, but there really isn't much done with it. He goes very quickly, and then we don't see him for much, and then he sort of just comes back every now and then. He's really just there to sort of stand in the corner of these big Apple-like presentations. He doesn't really do much in the movie, other than sort of come up with his conspiracies about the circle. And this is really where I guess the plot of the film is, but it's so poorly handled and managed that you just forget that John Boyega is there for most of the film. So even though that's kind of what's supposedly driving the film, it doesn't really feel like that, and you just completely forget about what is essentially the plot of the film, which isn't a good sign. I mean, really, I feel like if you wanted to make this film sort of more of a techno thriller, sort of more in the sense of, say, a Snowden, where we focus on John Boyega's character coming up with this conspiracy about the company, I think he would have gotten a much more interesting and engaging film, one that's actually invested in a plot, and we actually have something to follow throughout nearly 2 hours. Because really, his character is the only sort of driving motivation of the film, and he's barely in the film. Karen GILLAN is in the film as sort of her friend. She gets Emma Watson the job at the Circle, but halfway through the film she does this 180 that comes out of nowhere. She goes from being, ever lovable Karen GILLAN, who's incredible in Guardians of the Galaxy, and then she turns into being the Emperor from Star Wars. It's like, where did this turn come from? There's no build-up. It's incredibly abrupt. Ella Coltrane is in the film, as mentioned. He really serves no purpose other than just really comes off as kind of a catalyst for something later on in the film, but other than that, you don't really need his character. I mean, his performance isn't really that great. A lot of his scenes actually have a lot of continuity errors. There's a lot of hands and arms jumping around whenever he's talking, and it's not like a stylistic thing, or it doesn't come off as a stylistic thing. It just comes off as poor editing, to be honest, coupled with a performance that just isn't really that interesting. I mean, it really doesn't feel like there's a point to having him in the film. The one thing that really bothers me, which tends to be the problem with a lot of Hollywood films, is, the Skype calls always being in like 4K. But the thing is, with this film, they even put in focus pulling. There's a scene where Karen GILLAN and Emma Watson are talking over Skype, and the shot is actually focused solely on Karen GILLAN, and everything around her is out of focus, which everyone who knows Skype knows that isn't possible at all. So why would anyone think this is a good idea? I mean, I get that they're a high-tech company that have all these amazing things at their hands, but that doesn't make sense. Why would you have that in there? The real issue with the film is that it generally avoids conflict. There really isn't much conflict in the film. We're told about conflict, we see the ramifications of conflict, but we never actually see the conflict. We're always told about it, or something will happen, and nothing really comes of it, and we hear about it afterwards, and we're supposed to assume we know what's going on, but we don't really know what's going on. And so you're just watching and nothing is really happening while you're trying to engage in the film, and there's just nothing to really grasp on. And to be quite honest with you, Emma Watson, who usually is incredibly charming, she's always wonderful to watch on screen, but here her performance just isn't really the best, and she's carrying the film. This is her film, the film is focused on her. And there are a lot of times where, she is an American in this film, she's playing an American character, but her accent does change quite frequently. She will sometimes jump into British, because look, we all know she's British, and we're used to her speaking in her native tongue. So whenever we're listening to her talk, and something doesn't quite sound like something an American would say, it stands out more, because we're used to her speaking in her native tongue, so it happens to stand out a lot more. So that fluctuation in her performance just really kind of disconnects you from the experience. But as I mentioned before, the film doesn't really have a proper through line, and we're kind of expected to care for what's happening to Emma, what's happening around her, but we don't really have a real reason why, or what the goal of the film is, what the goal of Emma is. We're just kind of left to assume. No one's really doing anything. nothing's really happening. There's nothing there to really care about. And it just comes off as seeming like there were too many characters and too many concepts that wanted to go into this film, but the people involved didn't really know how to handle these concepts and characters and how to properly execute them within the film. It really comes off as a case of showcasing very interesting concepts just over an interesting story. We get a lot of talk about new technology and showcasing this technology, and that really overshadows the fact that the film doesn't really have a strong plot. The third act of the film is when it starts to feel a bit more like a thriller, and the film starts to come together, but since there's just been all this really poor setup beforehand, by that point we just don't care. We don't really care what's going on. We just really want to see this film be over and done with. I saw a lot of people checking their watches and checking their phones. A lot of people went up to go to toilet breaks. That's not good, especially if you're supposedly meant to be an interesting, high-concept drama thriller, but that, again, the film doesn't know what it is. But during the third act, we kind of start to feel more of that 1984 connection where, Big Brother is watching you. But again, everything is so poorly set up, we're just not invested, we just don't care. What I really truly feel is if the film had focused on John Boyega's character. Get rid of all the other bullshit. Focus on his character and his story, trying to come up with this conspiracy. You could have come up with a bit of a Snowden-type thriller, an interesting, intriguing thriller, which is, involves a lot of concepts and questions that are being asked today. I really think we would have come up with a much more interesting film. So ultimately, The Circle comes off as a wasted opportunity. It had interesting concepts, and I was excited. The trailers had me interested. It had a great cast. I was intrigued to see how the film would turn out, and ultimately it just comes off as having interesting concepts over an interesting story. So ultimately, I am very disappointed in The Circle. I think fans of Emma Watson might like it, but ultimately, everyone else, you might as well skip it. It's not anything that's going to grab you. You're not going to remember it in a week's time or in a day. You're probably going to forget about it. Unless you are a fan of Emma Watson, I really don't see a reason why you'd really want to invest yourself in this film. So very sad to say, I'm going to give The Circle a 4.5 out of 10. Again, I was quite interested in this film. I was kind of excited about it, but the execution is all over the place. There was no real plot to grab onto. It really just comes off as a lot of wasted opportunities. So ultimately, disappointed in The Circle. Otherwise, guys, thank you again for watching. Always appreciate you guys coming to the channel and checking out what videos I have up for you guys. Don't forget, if you do like this video, do hit the thumbs up button and leave a comment down below. Were you interested in seeing The Circle? Are you still planning to see it anyway? Do let me know your thoughts if you do see it and you do like it. Very happy to have a conversation with you down in the comments section to see what your thoughts were about the film. And don't forget, guys, you can subscribe to the channel as well. Also, remember to follow The Mono Report on Facebook and Twitter at The Mono Report. Thank you so much, guys, and stay right here for your Mono Fix. Bye.